Greetings from Vanderbilt University's Dyer Observatory. Crowning one of Nashville's tallest peaks, Dyer Observatory is a Tennessee treasure listed on the National Register of Historic Places. Our mission is to inspire student and public interest in science and technology through the wonders of astronomy and space exploration. The observatory serves the public with summer camps, teacher workshops, telescope nights, field trips, tours, concerts, and lectures with world-class scientists. We hope you may join us in the future to learn about the cosmos and appreciate our place in it.
Hi, everybody. Welcome. My name is Jenna Cavaziel, and I am an associate professor of English at Motlow State Community College. And it is my privilege tonight to be introducing our authors, Rash and George Singleton. Before we get into our conversation with them, I do have a few brief announcements. First, welcome to the 32nd Southern Festival of Books put on by Humanities Tennessee. I want to make a point to thank our many generous sponsors who help keep this event free and accessible, which is especially important this year. Sponsors include the Metro Nashville Arts Commission, Ingram Content Group, the Tennessee Arts Commission, Vanderbilt University, and Parnassus Books. There's also a couple of things you can do to help keep the festival free and accessible. If you are purchasing the lovely books we hear about in this session or any session of the festival, if you purchase them directly from Parnassus Books, the official bookseller of the festival, that's the way to go. There is also, if you are attending in Attendify, you will see a link to Parnassus Books, but also a link to donate to Humanities Tennessee in any amount to help support events like this. If you're not on Attendify, you can find those links really easily through the Humanities Tennessee website. If you are watching on Attendify or on Facebook, you can submit questions for the Q&A toward the end of this session, and then I will give those out to the authors. Just a quick reminder, the festival inclusion policy, which applies when we're all together in Nashville, also applies in the chat tonight. I want to thank the authors, not only for being here with us and taking the time to be here at the festival, but also for their wonderful books that we're going to hear more about tonight. Rash's In the Valley and George Singleton's You Want More. It has been such an absolute pleasure to be immersed in these books for the last couple of weeks. I've got these amazing characters walking around in my head, a Civil War widow, an art professor, a really gullible second grade teacher, and as the cover of George's might give away, a bunch of really good dogs. I think you guys will really enjoy these stories and these characters as well. To very briefly introduce our authors, Rash has published 23 books, including collections of poetry, short stories, novels, and a children's book. Among other prestigious awards, he has won the Frank O'Connor Short Story Award and 3 times the O. Henry Prize. He is also the Paris Distinguished Professor in Appalachian Cultural Studies at Western Carolina University, and the book he's discussing tonight, his newest book, is In the Valley. George Singleton has published 12 books, including collections of short stories, novels, and a book of writing advice for any of you aspiring writers in the audience. Among other honors, he has been awarded a Pushcart and a Guggenheim Fellowship. The book he's talking about tonight, You Want More, which is just such a great title for this book, is a selected works, 30 short stories collected together from 8 of his previous books across 20 years of his career. And as someone who's been following his writing for some time, seeing so much of his work together in one volume was really, really exciting. And now both are going to read a little bit and tell us a little bit more about these books.
Are we on, Jenna?
You are on, and you are up first.
I'm going to start. I'm going to read a Halloween. I'm going to read the first two pages of a Halloween story. Can y'all hear me?
I can, yeah.
This is called Four-Way Stop. G.R. prided himself on both historical and traditional figures. He felt as if he knew quite a bit about pop culture, too, at least movies and music. This was Halloween at his and Tina's front door, far from normal suburban neighborhoods. He'd already pointed out masks and said Batman, Iron Man, Superman, Spider-Man, Incredible Hulk, and Common Zombie. Clown, Ghost, Pocahontas, Ninja, Iraqi War Special Forces SEAL. He correctly identified Reagan, Bush, Napoleon, and Rush Limbaugh. Ballerina, pro wrestler, Andre the Giant, Lex Luger, Ric Flair, The Undertaker, Macho Man Randy Savage, Hulk Hogan, Dusty Rhodes, Ronnie Vincent Rash. He'd football players, Cam Newton and Peyton Manning. GR waved at parents waiting on the roadside in cars, gave a thumbs up, and said how he liked the way their little Lady Gagas look, their Mileys, their MacBook Airs, and cans of Red Bull. Damn, how many miniature Snickers we got left? We got any more of those Reese's cups? GR said to his wife. I don't remember Halloween being like this the last few years. The church must have quit having parties. I thought parents got scared off by razor blades and white powder. Tina sat in the den with the door open to the living room where her husband stood at the front door. She said, I told you to wear a bloody bandage on your head like some kind of Civil War amputee. That might scare some children away. She said, we already spent almost $50 damn. Please don't tell me I got to go back out. These kids aren't even from around here. Some of them aren't even kids. She picked up the channel changer, moved from one Food Network program to another. She went from a Tips on Vinegar barbecue show to one on noodle making in Southeast Asia. Tina wore flannel pajama bottoms with giraffes printed on them and a T-shirt advertising WSPA because she called first to the station one morning when she knew the trivia answer, which happened to be avocado green shag carpet. We might need more, GR said. And then he looked out the door and said, Jesus, two Jesuses. Are y'all with each other? Two young men limped up the walkway, both burdened with crosses fashioned from 4x4 links or pressure-treated pine, normally used for flower bed edging. GR yelled out, Jesus and Jesus, y'all are the first biblical characters we've had tonight. Good job, boys. He focused on the teenagers, but handed over a couple small Butterfingers and Milky Ways to a young hobo and Snow White, who elbowed in. They didn't say trick or treat or thank you, but he didn't mind. To the two Jesus, he said, man, that has to be rough, for they had to hold their arms out to the side with plastic orange pumpkins strapped to their wrists, which were strapped to the wood. We're not Jesus, the first kid said. I'm impenitent thief. Penitent thief, sorry, said the other kid. GR looked at them and thought, did a Mormon family move nearby? Are these boys Jehovah's Witnesses? He said, say all that again, what y'all just said. He did not say, aren't y'all a little too old to be trick-or-treating, but thought it. He also thought, it's almost 10 o'clock, and he remembered seeing a news item one time about how the last visitors on Halloween often case the house. The thief's father slid out of the shadow of the tea olive bush and said, it's what they wanted. They wanted to go out one last time. What can you do as a father? GR said, I doubt I have anything y'all want, and he stared. I mean, I got candy, that's it. Father had long brown hair and a beard, and when he stood between his boys, it looked like a painting GR saw one time in a book in the emergency room's waiting area. We ain't got no manna or silver. I'm allergic to peanuts, said impenitent thief. GR dumped what he had left in both boys' candy receptacles and turned off his porch light once they trudged back to the road. He didn't think, at first, about how he didn't see a car out there for them, and the next house stood a quarter mile away. He tried not to think about how his own son kind of looked like a penitent thief. And then it goes on from there.
All right.
Ron, you're next.
All right, I'm ready. This is the opening of my novella. Serena Pemberton comes back to North Carolina. When Serena Pemberton stepped out of the Commodore seaplane in July of 1931, a small but fervent contingent of reporters and photographers awaited her. Except for the pilot, she was alone. Those who would accompany her to the logging camp, both beast and human, had arrived by ship the night before. They were already on the train that would take them from Miami to North Carolina, all except for her minion Galloway, who procured an automobile to drive Serena to the station. As the metal ramp was ready, Galloway positioned himself beside the bottom step. He was short and wiry, shabbily dressed, a purple stump protruding from one sleeve. His cameras flashed mere inches from his face. He did not blink. As Serena descended, the first question shouted at her addressed the rumors surrounding her husband's death. For a moment, it didn't appear she would answer, but when her booted feet settled securely on the ground, the question was asked again, but with a caveat, that she loved her husband. I loved my husband, but one always learns from disappointments. But what of his death, Mrs. Pemberton? And what of so many others of your acquaintance, the reporter asked. Logging is a dangerous business, she answered. Galloway was in front of her now, but Serena, almost a head taller, was clearly visible. He cleared a path as more questions came. Would she continue to fight against the national park? And would she address the rumor that she was connected to the recent demise of Horace Kephart, the park's chief advocate? Did she oppose the Davis-Bacon Act? Why risk a transatlantic enterprise when she and her late husband had achieved so much in the States? Galloway opened the DeSoto's passenger door. Serena was about to get in when the sole woman in the group, a reporter for the New Republic, stepped close. She was very young, but like Serena, tall and blonde. When will you have achieved all your ambitions, Mrs. Pemberton? She asked, as others jostled around them. When the world and my will are one, Serena answered. And the young woman who asked the question was Martha Gellhorn, who was a World War II correspondent, fierce woman, once married to Hemingway.
That was great.
That's a great beginning.
What?
I was hoping I could get both of you to talk about returns with these books. So you started in just a perfect place, Ron, for that question. You're returning to those characters from Serena that I'm sure so many of our viewers remember and wanted more of. And George, of course, you're returning in this volume to short stories from throughout your career. And also there's another return happening here. You guys are returning to conversation with each other, which you do pretty frequently. So can you talk a little bit about that, returning to old themes in your books and returning to conversations with each other as well?
Well, I'm going to talk about our book returns.
That's what I thought you meant, Jenna. Like,
oh no!
People don't like your book. How can they return them and get their money? Thanks a lot, Jenna. Way to start off.
I'm fired. They gotta get.
No. Go ahead, George.
Well, mine, because it's like old stories and selected. I was not aware of how many of my characters kind of flow in and out of different stories. I mean, I knew that of course, I know when I write link collections, but some of them are showing up from 4 books later, just kind of as a minor character or just even a mention. And, that's kind of fun for me. It's kind of like a little game for me to say, oh, where can I slip Mendel Dawes into this story, or Penny Frewer, or Shirley E. something like that. And a lot of them are returned because they are from failed novels. Went, gee, this novel stinks that I just wrote. chapters 1 and 7 and 9 seem to work, and then they kind of rejigger them somewhat. And then people buy it and return them. What the heck?
Well, I think you created a world. And I think, I love that final story in your book, what could have been, because I think, part of what we want to do is kind of, create or sometimes reflect a world that we've lived in. I think, you're growing up in a small town. I grew up in a small town. I think part of what we want to do, at least is to kind of preserve something of that.
Yeah, and there's so many people. I remember when I was brought up in Greenwood, I mean, age 18, I wanted out of there badly. And now, as I get older, I wanted just today said, let's go for a drive tomorrow. And I went, let's go to Greenwood, just because, and I've lived in small towns, and you have too. I mean, neither of us have moved to metropolises. Kind of like a country song, though, either home and want to move out, or you're away from home and want to come back.
Yeah, and I think that's a good tension. I think that tension is, helps create art. Yeah.
Why did you? How long had you been thinking about returning to Serena?
Man, I didn't want to, and about 3.5 years ago, I just. An image came to me, a character named Ross that was a minor character in Serena.
Yeah.
Came back, and I knew I didn't want to write a novel because I just felt like that would just be too, I don't know, Ghostbusters too.
Yeah, yeah.
I finally decided that maybe, if I wrote a new form, that would be a good way of doing it. And I've never done a novella. I love novellas. I think, George and I both talked about how much we love. I think have you read Train Dreams? I think
I did. It's in the other room there, by Dennis Johnson. Yeah.
Yeah. That's a great novella, and Jim Harrison's. So anyway, so I thought, and I felt like there was a story to be told again, because a lot of what I was talking about in Serena with it's worse now. What's happening with this current administration? I mean, they're just, the protections for the wilderness areas. I mean, they're not just in peril; they're being destroyed now.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm glad you brought up politics and not me, because I never do. I was thinking about that as I was passing the oil derricks in the Smoky Mountains the other day.
Yeah. But yeah, but I think George and I've had we've been friends for a long time. It's been a lot of fun. He was the uncle, the bad uncle for my kids. I'd be over there trying to teach them how to ride a bicycle, and George would be over there saying, let me show you how to make these smoke rings. Caroline, since you've turned 8, you're ready.
Tell you, have a sip of this beer. But I also took them to church, Jenna, often, all the time.
Good.
I taught them to put Scotch tape on their fingertips and take change out of the collection plate. Fun.
Yeah, that was it. Yeah. I had to. They learned all sorts of new words from George. He really helped their vocabulary, and then I would have to explain to him. That F word. That's a fool. Yeah,
it's French. It's French.
Yeah.
It means seal in French. Hey, Jenna, you got another question?
I got just a ton of questions. I'm hoping our audience starts feeding us some too, because I'm sure they've got some great ones, and they don't just want to hear what an English professor has to say all night. But here's one. I've never asked a writer this. I can't believe I've never asked before. Collections of short stories are like my favorite kind of book to read. How do you decide what order they go in? And George, especially in your case where you were looking back, I imagine at all your short stories, deciding which ones got to go in. But Ron, too, in your case, the novella is last. It bounces back and forth in time. Is that all you guys? Are editors in on those decisions? How does this thing get put together?
For me, in a regular, like if I had a new collection, I just kind of put it in what order I think. Normally, I don't remember a time when a editor said, "Oh, we need to swap things." I'm sure maybe happened. With this collection, they're not chronological, and the editor Meg Reed, she said send off all these stories, and I did. And there were some where a minor character, let's say this guy named Benny, his story, This Itches Y'all, where he has to be the main character, that had to be before the next story when he was just a player on a baseball team. And the only thing I really requested for that was that the last story be the last story, because it's kind of a story, second person, and it's kind of saying what you wish for. And most of my stories, I think, are about characters either wanting to reinvent themselves or reinvent their towns. And sometimes if you reinvent your town, you end up with a bunch of Burger Kings and Hardee's and Long John Silver's and Taco Bells. I just kind of hope and with that particular collection too, if you want more, I wanted to swap around. And most of my stories are in first person, so I think 9 of those are in third and 2 in second person. So I wanted to kind of spread them apart a little bit. What about you, Ron?
Yeah, I really spend a lot of time trying to decide what goes in a collection. And a lot of times I'll have stories that I think are good enough, but they just don't fit the collection, what I'm trying to achieve in that particular collection. And in the Valley, I really wanted to move through time. I wanted the reader to feel time is fluid and sometimes not even to be sure exactly where in time, the reader is. But, some of it's, you don't want 2 stories that kind of bump up against each other that are too much alike. Some, shift in tone. But to me, it's like a musician putting together a CD. I mean, you hope the sum is greater than the individual parts. And I think part of that is how you put, where you put where you place those stories. And to me, that's hugely important. I spent a lot of time thinking about that, which stories fit this book and maybe not another one.
Yeah. In this great book, if y'all can see it, even in stories where about time, I mean, you have a contemporary story. We were talking earlier about L'Homme Blessé. It's contemporary. It's taking place, as I see it, in 2020.
Yeah.
Well, that story goes back to talk about World War II. And I mean, it all depends on that painter's experience, like at the caves in France. So kind of a lot of your stories are going like this in time. It's really cool.
Yeah.
I love that story. That's a great story, Ron.
Well, thank you. Appreciate that. Coming from you, that matters. And you're being too nice to me tonight, George. Come on.
I get freaked out about the technology. I had all these.
Oh, okay, that's it. That's it. Well, I wanted to tell a story I don't think I've ever told. I don't know if you know this story. I bet you do. But I think one thing I hope we talk a little bit about tonight is just that this hasn't come easy for either one of us.
Yeah.
I would hope that's encouraging to younger writers. But Phil Snoddy, told me this story and Phil. I ran track. George and I first met when we ran track, but the story I wanted to tell was that Phil was really, really good. He was like maybe state champion or close to it.
Yeah.
And George was a few years younger, and they would run together in the mornings. And Phil, the way I heard the story was that Phil said one day, I don't want you running with me.
I was holding him back.
Yeah.
And it was true. I mean, at that time, he was running about a 9:42 mile in high school. And at that time, I was running about a 10:42 mile, and I was in the 9th grade. But
the story he told me was, after he told you that, the next day you were there. And that to me is what it's about.
Yeah. Well, actually, what happened was, because, man, I'm a mule. I'll remember. So he went, he didn't say it. He was nice, and he was right. And even as a 14, 15-year-old, I knew he was right. But he went, I needed to just kind of train on my own, keep my own pace. And I went, yeah, okay. That next morning I got up about 4:30, and I knew, we'd run these 6-mile runs. So I passed him on my way home. I had already run about 4.5 miles, and he was coming, and he went, damn, what time do you start? I just kept on running. I didn't say a word. Just because I'm, and it's kind of like that as a writer, when you first start, when you and I were in the early 90s and we were hanging out, and both of us are going like, man, I got a good rejection today. And that was like the highlight of the week or the month. Both of us, I think, you get a rejection, you go, oh yeah, buddy, I'll show you, especially if it were just a form. But hell, I get form rejections now, but
I do too.
Yeah.
Oh, man.
Well, there's that one.
Thanks for saying that, guys.
Yeah. In case anybody's wondering, I don't run anymore.
I got a question over in the chat. It's from Tim. He says, Ron, we heard George mention a wrestler named Rash in his story. Do you have any Singletons in your two stories?
Oh, yeah. Well, just one of George's ancestors, Jenna Cavaziel, who in the early 1860s had the North Carolina record for the most tapeworms in her belly. She managed to avoid them after drinking some Jim Beam whiskey.
Ron and I started that a long time ago. I imagine I started it. If I don't. And just about in every book, I don't think that Singleton's in the Valley. I didn't run across one.
No.
I'm really hurt, Ron. I feel like you've forgotten.
Well, you always outdo me on this. It's a losing game, and with a name like Rash, I'm already,
It's so easy. It's so easy. It's kind of like that joke. A fly walks into the bar and says, "Where's the stool?"
Speaking of, can you get that one off your hat, George? It's been there about 5 minutes.
Yeah, probably. That's probably a stink bug. We're being invaded by stink bugs.
Well, we answered that question quite well.
Yeah, I loved it. Can you talk, because there are probably so many aspiring writers in the audience, and you've talked a little bit about rejection and persistence, which I think is enormously encouraging. But can you talk a little bit about how your writing is going this year in 2020, and how circumstances are changing or not changing the way you write, and what other writers might want to learn from you?
You go, Ron. I know you're writing like crazy.
Well, not like crazy. I'm writing. Yeah, I mean, I think what's changed for me is that I'm doing it more to reality. I mean, things are so bad right now that even if I'm writing about some things, just to get out of it. But I don't know. I've heard some writers have some real problems, but I think George and I are about the same on this. I mean, this is what we do. And, I continue to write. Obviously, these things affect me and my writing, but, I've continued to write. I guess that's the simplest answer.
Yeah, I started off in March of 1968 when this virus started. I started off like a house on fire. I thought, man, I'm teaching Zoom crap and all that. And then things kind of petered out a little bit. But then out of the last couple months, I've really been having a good time. And it just means get my butt back in a chair. And, I sent out the story today. And the one problem I'm having, because most of my stories kind of take place in the now, is right. And go, oh, yeah, he walked into that store. Did he have a mask on? And I think, I don't want to be thinking people wearing masks all the time. So I have to kind of go back and fiddle with some stories,
Yeah.
But it's just, I know, it's just, sit down by the desk and give yourself a few hours or an hour. Jenna,
How is the, sorry?
I was wondering if you're still there.
I'm here. Hanging on. Tell us a little bit about how virtual book tour and virtual events like this differ from previous in-person experiences, and how you're liking it or not liking it.
I'll start, Ron. Is that okay?
Yeah.
I was fearful of them in the beginning. I'm still a little bit fearful of them. A lot of it has to do with, it seems like there are a whole lot of different platforms and they're all different. And I'm scared that technology is going to mess up kind of like it did before we really got started. Now it's really freaking out a little bit, starting at about 5 o'clock y'all's time. I miss seeing real human beings. I'm afraid that this may be the wave of the future, though, because it's going to save money on publishers to have fly people around or have them drive around and hotel rooms. And it's kind of sad if that happens, but it's got good points and bad points.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, the nice thing is, there's a stress with traveling too. I mean, once you get to the bookstore, that's great. George and I have done this so much that we have friends at just about every independent bookstore in the country, probably. People, we visited so many. But, that can be stressful, and, worrying about flights or, making sure you drive there in time. But, the first couple of these did not go well for me. I mean, it was like I wasn't getting on. I was freaking out. And, one of them I got on like 3 minutes late, and another one I just barely made it. But I'm getting a little better at it. I think the main thing I do is I'm just a little paranoid. So I'm about an hour before I'm already trying to get on because I'm
me too.
hitting the wrong button. But to me, the best part's been the conversations, because I found them so far to be relaxed, mainly, I guess, because I've known everybody I've done one with.
As a reader, it's great because, every day you can see 2 or 3 of these things. I mean, I have buddies that that are going to be, that are living in Mississippi. I'm not going to be able to drive to Mississippi to see them do a book signing, but I can sit here and watch them and ask foolish questions and stuff like that. So as a reader, it's great, I think.
Yeah. And I would think for young writers, it would be, I'm not necessarily talking about this one, but I think some of these would be great to learn from. I mean, I could have used them when I was starting out. It would have been, sometimes I'd read, you'd read interviews, but, this is, I would think it's pretty nice for younger writers and readers. Yeah, definitely readers.
Yeah.
We've got another question that's come in from the chat from Nathan. Who do you two hand your drafts to? Do you have trusted beta readers? And how has that process evolved for you over time?
Well, my first reader is my brother, who's very good. He's really good editor, and he knows what I think the advantage for me is. He not only knows the story, he knows what I'm trying to do. He knows my work well enough. So he usually will read it first, and brothers don't have to be nice, and so he really comes at it hard. And then I've got my other editor, Lee Boudreau, is just as good as it gets, and I've never had a problem taking advice, criticism, if it makes the work better. Your ego is just not, that's, I've never had a problem with that. And I think writers have to, there is a kind of balance though. I mean, I think there's a place where you have to believe in yourself enough to where if you really feel something strongly, you're going to fight for it, but at the same time, you've got to be open, and that's always a little bit of a tightrope. But I've been lucky in that with the editors I've worked with, that if I felt something strong enough, that usually they would come around, but very often they were right.
It'd be a funny thing to do is think of some enemy that I have and say, that person's my beta reader, and he loves reading everybody's work. Please send it. Nah. I don't have anybody read my work. The first person to read my work is an editor at a magazine. And it's just because I'm a little bit embarrassed about, I feel like an imposter anyway. So, and like Ron, my feelings do not get hurt. I know that an editor wants the best work in her or his magazine, and they're not going to be mean to me. So if an editor says, you start off fine, but boy, this sure did fizzle out, then I know that I probably need to go work on that story a little bit. If an editor says, this has a lot of possibilities and we like it, if you do this, I usually do that. Only a couple times have I really argued. Because, an editor, it'd be like if I baked a cake and I gave it to you, Jenna, and you ate it and said, man, this is terrible. Did you put sugar in it? And I say, oops, I forgot. I'd be an idiot to say, that is how God must have wanted me to make this cake. I'm going to put sugar in the cake. So
I need all the help I can get. So anybody who can make my work better, I'm grateful to.
It's a big. I mean, I know Ron's brother, and they're really, really close. It puts I'm afraid that if I let's say I sent it to Ron, hey, I would feel like I'm really burdening him, so I wouldn't want to do that at all. And two, I might fear that he might say to me, "Oh yeah, George, I like that story. Sometimes your best friend isn't the person to have read your work, because they're all or your mother." I don't know how many students I've had over the years who said, "But my mother really liked it." Well, what publishing house was she with?
That's I've heard that a few times too, and you got to get outside of that for sure. But I think the one thing that you don't want to lose. I mean, I can read a page, sometimes just a paragraph blind, and I know George wrote it. And I think that's where you've really got to, you want to keep that distinctive voice as a writer. And I think the good editors recognize that. I think what makes a really good editor has to be, I think, in some ways empathetic, because the editor has to be able to kind of get inside the writer. That's why I think Maxwell Perkins was such a great editor for Fitzgerald and Wolfe. He wasn't trying to make he had no ego either. And I think the best editors, such as Lee Boudreau, in my case, understand that.
Yeah, I do too.
We've got a question from Karen, and it matches up with one of my own questions. What authors do you read when you're not writing? And I see bookshelves behind both of you. Who are some of your go-to beloved writers that you return to time after time? Who are some new voices you might be reading? Are you reading literary magazines at all? What's on those shelves?
Yeah. Well, for me, if it's, especially if I feel like I'm just kind of treading water, I'll go back and read Lewis Norton, whom I love, and maybe a page or two of Barry Hannah. I can never write a sentence like he did. I mean, it's amazing. If I can't figure out how to get from point A to point C, I go read Jim Cheever. I still read a lot of Flannery O'Connor. Since this Zoom tour stuff, I've been a couple, like Ron, I've already done one of these, so I've tried to be, because I don't want to be angry. I've read everybody's books. Lately, I've read Lake Life by Jamie Toyston, Hieroglyphics by Jill McCorkle, Blue Marlin by Lee Smith, The Big Door Prize by M.O. Walsh. I've been on a kind of a read and tear. It's a good season. I've read, In the Valley by my buddy Ron Rash. It's a good season for books right now. I mean, there are a bunch of good books out.
I just read Jill's book, Hieroglyphics. Really
it's sad.
Dark and sad, but true and wise. And a good friend of ours, Randall Keenan, recently died. And his book of stories it's really sad to read it because I was talking to him about a month ago, right, the week before he died. But Yeah, that's a good book. You know, that's one I believe in. And when I go back, I mean, yeah, I kind of go back to certainly. I think O'Connor's probably writes about as perfect a story. I've been on a Chekhov kick lately, and I find what he did more and more amazing. I think it's interesting because when I was younger, I didn't think he didn't blow me away, but more and more he is. There's certain writers I can't read. I can't read Faulkner when I'm writing. I mean, he's almost like a magnet. He just kind of pulls you, and I can just see every time I start reading him when I'm writing, my sentences, you know, start getting like pythons. You know, they just go on and on. Are there writers like that for you, George? Are there writers you have to stay away from?
Cormac McCarthy.
Yeah, it would be the same. Yeah,
I read all that stuff, especially earlier, but damn it, I'll start trying. I'll say, you know, suddenly my quotation marks are not on my keyboard anymore. And I can't pull it off because people will read it and go, is he saying that, or is he thinking it, or is that just a description of something? So I have to stay away, you know. And I really like, especially those early novels I liked a ton. I read those like maybe right out of college. You know, he wasn't as well known as he is now. In the early 80s is when I started reading him, and it kind of messed me up.
Yeah, I read Suttree. That one in Blood Meridian, and I think I lean more towards Suttree because it's more humane.
Yeah.
But actually, I got a copy of Suttree, a first edition, for like, I don't know, $10 back, and I still got it. And that just kind of gives you an idea of, you know, his reputation.
Where are you keeping that, Ron?
I am keeping it in a safe that you don't have a combination to.
I can weasel that combination out of your kids.
Yeah, you would do that. You got to tell that story.
Okay. You know, okay, I'm going to explain this to Tim, who asked the question. Ronnie Vincent Rash really isn't in that story that I read. I just kind of threw that in. But once upon a time, Ron Rash and his lovely wife Ann and I were sitting at a restaurant, and she said, you know what? Ron's father really wanted to name him, don't you, George? And I said, what? And Ron said, don't you tell him, man. He'll use it against me later. Don't tell him. Well, you know, again, I'm a mule. I just sit around and wait. And remember, you know, a mule will wait 20 years to kick somebody that did it wrong. So I waited and waited and waited. Maybe 3 or 4 years went by. Then Ron and his son James and I were eating lunch one day. And just for fun, I said something to James like, you know that your grandfather wanted to name your daddy Lester, don't you? And James said, I thought he wanted to name you Rembrandt, Dad. And I went, ha, I win. And Ron just shook his head. So in some of my books, there's a Rembrandt Rash in there, you know, and his middle name's Vincent after Van Gogh, I assume. Isn't that right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
My mom said he wouldn't survive growing up.
Yeah.
With a name like Rembrandt in the South.
Yeah, Sue was right about that. Ron's mom was like, we're not naming our kid Rembrandt. Name him Pablo.
Oh, man. I think that's about the high note we're going to end on. We're unfortunately right at the end of our time. And I just have a couple of announcements to wrap things up. Thank you, Ron and George, for being here tonight, for sharing your time with the festival. It has been really fun. And thank you to all the viewers, whether you're watching it right now or you're watching the recording later. Thank you so much for spending your time here with us. You can support the festival by purchasing your books, whether they're the books from tonight's session or the books from any session from Parnassus Books, the official bookseller of the festival. And you can donate in any amount to Humanities Tennessee to support events like this. And I hope that everybody checks out the schedule and enjoys the rest of what's on offer at the festival through the 11th. Thanks so much.
You did a good job, Jenna.
Yeah, thank you.